When you find an issue with a data before you start your analysis, what would you do? These are the kind of things I'll be discussing in this video. What you do, the kind of data issue you can find, and the possible solution in real life. While working with data or getting ready for data analysis, you might realize that you do not have the data you need. And in some cases, you do not have sufficient data. So you have data, but it is not enough. In some cases, you can use what we call proxy data to replace real data. Think about it like replacing butter with oil in a recipe when you do not have any butter available to use. In other cases, you might find out that it is not possible to use proxy data. It is not reasonable. And in those cases, what you need to do is what? Collect more data. So let's look at the various issues that you might have. Let's consider a number of them and how you can work around them. Three major issues I'll be looking at in this video, or we will be looking at in this video, is when you have no data for your analysis, when you have very little data, insufficient, not enough for your analysis, and when you have wrong data. That includes when you have data with errors. So we'll look at these issues and what solutions we can apply in the real world for this. In the first case, where you have no data, the ideal thing will be to gather data on a small scale and use that to perform your preliminary analysis. And then you can tell the stakeholders that you need more time to get more data. For example, let's say you are surveying employees for an analysis to determine what they think about the new performance or a new plan that the business has just launched. You can start off by doing a sample, just sample a few employees for the preliminary analysis, and then ask for more time to sample more employees to give a broader view of what your analysis has presented or the result you have gotten from it. If you don't have enough time to collect the data, then this is where proxy data comes into play. You could use proxy data from other data sets, and it's usually the most common workaround when you don't have time to collect data, but you still need to produce some results and analyze some data. Let's say, for example, you are expected to analyze the peak travel times for commuters, but then you do not have the data for that particular city. You have to look at the peak travel time for, let's say, people who live in London, and then you do not have the data for London, people who live in London. You can now use the data from another city with a similar size and demographic like London to do your analysis. In this case, that's not a real data of people or commuters in London, but you are using a proxy data, like I said, like a replacement of the real data to see what another city that looks exactly like London and has the same similar size and demographic, of London would look like. And you can use that to give an idea of what the result will look like in London. That's if you do not have time to collect the data. If you do have time to collect the data, the first step would be ideal. Data issue number 2, when you have too little data. In a case where you have too little data, there are two possible solutions. The first one would be to do the analysis with proxy data alongside the actual data. A good example would be, let's say you're trying to analyze the trend of owners of Mercedes-Benz. You can make your data set larger by also adding the data for owners of BMW. In that case, you increase the volume of your data set for the analysis. The second possible option is to adjust your analysis to align with the available data you have. So you do not need to use a proxy data in this case. You just work with what you have. A good example is, let's say you're doing an analysis that involves adults, that is 18 years and above. But in your data set, 18 to say 24 years are missing. That age range is missing in your data set. You can go ahead and do your analysis as usual with what you have. But at the end of the analysis, when you're writing your report, ensure that you state in that report that your conclusions and results are based on only adults that are 25 years and older. In that case, you have not misled your audience or your stakeholders because you have clarified what your analysis was based on. Okay, so those are the two possible options or solutions when you have very little data for your analysis. If you've gotten to this point, I think you should click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and just stay tuned for more. Thank you. Now let's move to data issue number 3. When you have wrong data or you have data including errors, what do you do? In this video, I'm going to give you 3 possible solutions. First possible solution would be if you have the wrong data because the initial requirement was not understood. So during your requirement gathering stage, you didn't understand what the stakeholders were asking for. The easiest thing to do is communicate the requirements again, ensure that you get it, ensure that you understand it. So a good example would be, let's say you needed to do an analysis of the exam scores for female students only, but you had gone to analyze male students. You could now go ahead to do the right thing once the requirement is fully understood and you are all on the same page. The second will be to identify the errors, and if possible, you fix it at the source by checking the pattern in the errors. When you identify a trend in the pattern of errors, fix it at the source. So if, for example, your data is in a spreadsheet and you find out that the calculated values in a particular column are wrong, instead of just changing the calculated values, the ideal thing will be to go to that conditional statement or expression or whatever formula you have on that and change that conditional statement, that expression, instead of just changing the calculated value. So you nip the error at the source, and that should clear the entire error for the data set. The third solution will be to ignore the error if it's just very little. For example, you have billions and billions or millions of rows of data, and you know that the amount of, they have maybe 5% error. So you know that if you analyze the data, the error is not going to be very significant. You can go ahead and analyze your data ignoring that error because it won't cause a lot of systematic bias. Okay, let's say you have your data set translated from a different language and some of them are not completely correct in the translation. You could ignore that and go ahead with the ones with the right translation, and that should possibly be good. Please note that sometimes data with errors is a sign that your data is not reliable. So please use your instinct and best judgment to decide whether that data is worth analyzing or not. I saw this decision tree on how to handle data with error or where you do not have sufficient data, and I did like it. I'll try and see if I can put it on the screen for this video. But basically what that decision tree is trying to tell you is how you can manage these data issues, which one, what to do and what not to do. So the first will be, you have a data error. Can you fix or request a corrected data set? If the answer is yes, perform the analysis after the data has been corrected, not before. If the answer is no, the next question is, do you have enough data to omit the wrong data? If the answer is yes, perform the analysis without the wrong data. So you remove the wrong data, use what you have, because what you have is still what? Sufficient. But if the answer is no, you do not, that means you do not have enough data. You can now check, can you proxy the data? Can you use proxy data in this case? If the answer is yes, perform the analysis with the proxy data. But if the answer is no, then the next question will be, can you collect more data? If the answer is yes, go ahead and perform the analysis after you have collected more data. So don't do it before. But if the answer is no, then you have to notify the business, your stakeholder, or whoever is asking for this analysis, and modify the business objective if possible. I hope this video has helped you understand some of the data issues you can face, the possible solutions, and how to just navigate your way around data issues. If you found this video useful, why not do the nice thing you should do? Share so that others could learn. And I do a lot of other contents like this, so if you love it, click the subscribe button. It's free, completely free. Follow me for more. Stay graceful. I love you, and see you in the next video.